Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Once again, this is Moshe Goldberg signing on for Brit Olam, the Noahide World Center, on our live broadcast, which will also be available on our website after we are finished. I have not exactly set the date or the program yet, but be ready for another broadcast 4 weeks from tonight. That is what we have been doing. I think we have an exciting lineup of 2 people for tonight. I just want to remind you, before we get to our 2 speakers tonight, that I spoke at a book launch for Abraham Livni's book, The Return of Israel. It is on our website. It's available through Facebook. I really recommend that if you can, you listen to it, and I certainly recommend that you buy the book, which is available at Geffen Publishers, available at Amazon. It's available in Israel in various bookstores. Abraham Livni, The Return of Israel and the Hope of the World. It's a book that I could not put down. I recommend it for everybody. Now let's get to tonight's program. We have 2 interesting speakers tonight. The first is Mrs. SylvetskyTabak, the managing editor of Arutz Sheva. The second is Moshe Kempinski. We've had him before, and we've asked him to come back for a second talk. Again, the first is Rachel SylvetskyTabak. She sent me that her bio or her resume has many, many items, and it really does. I'll start with a few of the more recent ones. Rachel Sylvetsky was academic coordinator of the Touro College Graduate School. She was the chairperson of Emunah Israel, Religious Zionist Women Organization. She was the head of the Kfar HaNoar Hadati Youth Village, and she is now the managing editor of Arutz Sheva. Rachel will talk on the topic of women in Judaism. Here we go.
Hi, thanks for being with us today. My topic is women in Judaism, which is kind of a broad topic, and one about which I suppose one could say that there are various aspects. There's a lot of confusion, even militancy, and certainly a good deal of talk about the role of women today, not necessarily in Judaism. However, I think that we should be looking for guidance and answers by finding or looking for the signs of God's messages on the subject. Like, what role did God set for women, if he indeed did give them a role or goals that are in addition to the ones for mankind as a whole? And how does the Bible look at women? What does it tell us about women? Does the Bible set goals for women, for their values, for their lifestyle, behavior? After all, the path that God would like humanity to take is not only paved with commandments. There are ethical choices, value judgments, roles to choose, behavioral decisions to be made along the way. What role are women expected to play? Is it essentially different from that of men? Well, those are the questions. But as it's a very broad topic, I am limiting it to an introduction of 2 aspects, maybe a third, that will just give you some food for thought. First, I'd like to briefly touch some of the stories of the women in the Bible, those who seem to be larger than life, symbolic prototypes of women. Let's study how they led their lives a bit and see if that can enlighten us. And second, we can generalize from the attitudes of the Bible and its commentators to the special experiences and relationships that only women have the ability to experience: childbirth, nurturing, nursing, motherhood. We're not going to be able to discuss all of these in depth, of course, but give an overview. And some of the things I'm going to mention can be seen in Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz's book on women in the Bible. The women in the Bible are wonderful role models. There are many more men mentioned in the Bible than women. That's easy to notice. But the good and righteous women mentioned, from whom we're supposed to learn behavioral norms, there are evil ones, such as Jezebel, but they're not our subject. The good ones have character traits and choices that can be abstracted from their histories and help us. I'm going to start with Ruth, because her story is read on the closest holiday, Shavuot, Pentecost. Ruth and Rachel. as prototypes that we can learn about. The story of Ruth is the story of a Moabite princess who marries into a Judean family that moved to Moab, out of Israel, to escape a famine. Her husband, her brother-in-law, and her father-in-law die, and her mother-in-law Naomi is left alone. When Naomi decides to return to her native land and brave the reception she will get, because she left a rich woman, left everyone to starve, and returns a pauper, Ruth decides to accompany the elderly woman. She goes out into the fields when they return to Judea, to Bethlehem, and gathers the fallen sheaves of wheat that are left for the poor, she, a princess from birth. And in the end, she marries her husband's kinsman, Boaz, and is the start of the house of David. Ruth is the epitome of loving kindness, doing more than is asked of her, doing more than is expected of her, and more than is even necessary to do for one's fellow man. She's also a symbol of loyalty, as she goes to a strange land, unwilling to let her husband's mother face life alone. The matriarch Rachel shows this trait as well, loyalty to her older sister, who is ashamed that her younger sibling Rachel is going to be wed before her. She actually gives her sister, the rabbis say, the secret codes that all lovers have, so that when Leah marries Jacob, wearing a veil so he cannot tell that it's the wrong woman, she will be able to pass for her sister. Rachel gives us other lessons. She shows the power of love as she waits 7 years for her husband. And she shows how women can overcome adversity, the adversity that only they experience. She gives up her husband for love of her sister. She undergoes the taunts of her friends that must have been terrible the following morning. She is barren while her sister has sons. She dies in childbirth when she finally does have children. But this life of challenges and trials makes her resting place, her grave, the one that thousands of women visit each week because they feel that she understands them. And it makes her the one who is buried on the road, on the wayside, so the children of Israel can pass her grave when they go out to exile and pray. God speaks to her in Jeremiah 31. Her weeping for her children is heard by him, and he says to her, "Cease your tears, cease your crying, for your children will return to their borders. Have hope." In the stories of Ruth and Rachel, these larger-than-life women who overcome such difficult trials and have to make such difficult choices, we see that they are women of sensitivity, full of empathy, a source of comfort, a source of caring, of love and loving kindness. They are role models for all women, and that is how it seems the Bible would like women to be. But not only that way, because in contrast, the Bible also shows us women of power, of far-reaching actions. We have Sarah, the matriarch, the first matriarch, assertive and wise, a symbol of a woman as a game changer. Abraham listens to what she says because God tells him to take her advice, all her advice. Everything she says, just listen, he tells Abraham. Look at the matriarch Rebecca, who hatches a courageous plan to make sure the right son becomes the future leader when she feels that her husband doesn't really understand the situation because he's elderly and blind. Her son and husband then heed her sound decisions, and they are the right ones. And then there is Queen Esther in Persia, whose courage and stalwartness in the face of life-threatening personal danger saves all the Jewish people, who tells her uncle Mordecai that she will go to the king, although he has not invited her to, and remember, this is Persia. But she finds a brilliant and psychologically clever way to convince the king to heed her plea and save her people. And then there's Deborah, the beloved prophetess and judge, who leads Barak, the general, to a successful battle against the Philistines, even though he's not sure he really wants to do that. These women, these powerful women and wise women, are there when the future of their people is at stake. They are there for the Jewish people. Their unflinching courage, their wise use of the power they wield, are the messages that we are supposed to glean. But in addition, we are supposed to see something else. Rebecca is modest. She's powerful later on, but she's a modest person. She covers her face with a veil when she meets her future husband Isaac for the first time. Sarah doesn't look for publicity, doesn't try to take over the role of leader in public. And Esther asks the people to fast for her success and relies on them. So although biblical women often work behind the scenes, as does Rebecca, as does Esther, the men in their lives listen to them because of their wisdom. These women make history. They change the world. It's worth noting that in the book of Kings, the mothers of the kings are always mentioned by name. This is supposed to show us that they're the influence, for good and bad, on their sons. And that's true today as well. As I once said, speaking before a group of Arab women at a conference, men wage wars, but their nurture and their early education is in the hands of women who can prevent it. And that brings us to Leah, the typical mother of Israel, the woman who is known through her sons, her family, another womanly prototype that some women choose. And perhaps the least known woman who can sum up the general status of women in the Bible, someone who is caring, powerful, with a power often exhibited behind the scenes, not looking for glory, but for results, is the woman called Eshet Manoach. She's not even named. She's called the wife of Manoach. She's the mother of Samson. The angel of God appears to her, not to her husband. Her husband follows her, the Bible says. But we don't even know her name, because that doesn't matter to her. Nor does the woman of valor in Proverbs chapter 34 have a name. She's a successful businesswoman. She runs a household. She's charitable. She's kind to the poor. She knows that her beauty is not enough if she's not God-fearing. But strength and magnificence clothe her. And she, the Bible says, is prepared for the end of days. So that tells us a bit, food for thought, and perhaps something one can look up to learn more about the role of women in the Bible. It's an all-encompassing role. It's an assertive role. It's a modest role at the same time. It's warm, it's caring, it's full of loving kindness, and it brings about change in the world. But perhaps the most definitive explanation of women's special place in the world that God created is found in the following thought, based on the Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs of England, talking about childbirth and that which surrounds it. He says that God shows acute sensitivity to the birth of a child. Nothing is more natural than procreation. Every living thing engages in it. But the test of the three matriarchs, whom I talked about, Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel, is the difficulty of having a child. There are other women in the Bible who have that difficulty. That seems to be the way God tests their faith. The Torah goes to great lengths to describe this. How many of the heroines of the Bible, among them Sarah, as I said, Rebecca, Rachel, Hannah, and the Shunammite women, are infertile and have children only through a miracle. Clearly, the Bible intends a message here. It's an unmistakable one. To be a human being is to know that survival is not a matter of biology alone. What seems natural is for us a miracle. Every child is a gift of God to his mother. No faith has ever taken children more seriously or devoted more of its efforts to raising the next generation as ours. Childbirth is wondrous. To be a parent is the closest anyone can come to God himself. And that, incidentally, is why, in Judaism, women are considered closer to God than men, because they, unlike men, know what it is to bring new life into the world, the way God brings life out of himself. The idea is beautifully captured in the verse about another woman, in which, when leaving the Garden of Eden, Adam turns to his wife and calls her Chava, which in Hebrew means the mother of all life. And then there are laws relating to childbirth that can give us a lesson. When a mother gives birth, not only does she undergo great risk, until recently it was an even greater risk, but not as much in modern times, still it's a risk. She's also separated from what until now had been part of her own body, and which has now become an independent person. If that is so in the case of a boy, it's doubly so in the case of a girl, who with God's help will not merely live and grow, but may herself, in later years, become a source of new life. At one level, therefore, the laws that we will hear in a moment signal the detachment of life from life. The Bible says that women must bring a sacrifice after 40 days for a boy and 80 for a girl. At another level, that suggests something much more profound. It's as if God was saying to the mother, for 40 days in the case of a boy, and doubly so in the case of a girl, because the mother-daughter bond is a stronger one, I exempt you from coming before me. You do not have to come to the place of holiness, to the temple, because you are fully engaged in the holiest act of all, nurturing and caring for your child. Unlike others, you do not need to visit the temple to be attached to life and sacred splendor. You are experiencing it yourself, directly, with every fiber of your being. Look upon your child with wonder, for you have been given a glimpse of the great secret, otherwise known only to God. A new mother's bedside replicates the experience of the temple. She now knows what it is for love to beget life, and in the midst of mortality to be touched by an intimation of immortality. And that is one of the special roles of women in Judaism and in God's creation. If we wish to talk about the commandments that women have, as opposed to those of men, then we can briefly state that women have 3 special commandments that are only for them. There are many commandments that both men and women obey, and there are other commandments from which women are exempt. All that gives us a picture of how God looks at women's roles. We generally tend to believe that in ancient times women were close to the status of slaves, and there are parts of the world where that's true today. Some people even think that it's possible that with juggling a home and a career, modern women are sort of slaves as well. But one quick look at women's commandments in the Bible shows a different picture entirely, and one can glean the message easily. The first commandment of women, the first mitzvah of women, is that when baking dough for bread, one takes a portion of the dough that's being kneaded and gives it to the temple. Symbolically, we have here a woman investing effort into doing things for her loved ones, first of all, whatever she does. This is just a symbol. But not forgetting to thank the Lord while she's doing it for what she has, giving a higher and spiritual meaning even to what might seem like tedious work and a tedious repetitive task. The second commandment for women is called nidah. Those are the laws of ritual purity. They invest the marital act with a holy intimacy and include a period of separation with a very strong message that the relationship between a man and a woman has to be based on more than the physical. So that these 2 commandments tell us that eating and sexual intimacy, 2 activities that can be totally physical, have a spiritual aspect to them. And they are the woman's. The third commandment is candlelighting for Sabbath and other holidays. It's a simple act. It only takes a few minutes, but it symbolizes what a woman can bring to her home: light, warmth, rays of spirituality, and making time to get together as a unit, as a family. What does the Bible tell us here about a home? That being there is not defined as just staying home, but as the worthwhile godly effort of building a home. And the commandments from which women are exempt show understanding of the difficulties of balancing the different and varied multitasking of today's women, and also what priorities are, because women are exempt from any commandments that depend on an exact time. So that if we take together the lives of women in the Bible and what they teach us, childbirth and what it shows about women's closeness to God, and the commandments that are special for women that show them and explain to them how they can bring spirituality into their lives and the lives of those they love, we see that the role of women in Judaism is a central one, is a powerful one, and is a very worthy one. Thank you.